Today's webinar is brought to you by the American Samoa Alliance Against Domestic and Sexual Violence in partnership and the continued support from the VA Pacific Islands Healthcare System. And today's webinar will also be co-facilitated by Dr. Sarah Wong and from Hawaii, and our very own local Dr. Chuetsa Magachin from our local VA office. So
thank you so much, Judy, and thank you to you all for making the time. As Judy had mentioned, there's a lot of things going on, especially around the holidays. If some of you may be aware that last month, which was just a few days ago, we celebrated National Alzheimer's Disease Awareness Month. And so I thought that this would be a really important topic for us to talk about and to really connect on. And so I'm really excited to have one of our illustrious residents with us who's going to share some, and I'll kind of bring some of the information back and talk about it from a relevant perspective here in Samoa. We really wanted to try and make it something that was going to be relevant for our caregivers and our family members here. So please, if there are any questions along the way, feel free to add them into the chat box. We'll moderate as we go along, or if you want to wait till the end, we can go ahead and do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Sarah. But before I do that, thank you again to the American Samoa Alliance Against Domestic and Sexual Violence for always being willing to be a partner with us in all the different initiatives that we have. So we're hoping that this will be fruitful. Please take from it what you will. If there are questions beyond here, which I'm sure that there will be, please reach out. The idea is to continue the dialogue even beyond today. Okay? So I'll turn the time over to Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. McCutcheon, and thank you, Judy, for having us. So today we'll be going over how to provide care for people in our lives who may be experiencing challenges with their memory. We'll be looking at how aging, trauma, and caregiver burnout may be affecting our memory functioning. And so I want today to be as helpful and informative for you all as possible. So really, if you have any thoughts, questions, or feedback during, the presentation, please, turn on your camera and interrupt me. And also, if you want to just type your question in the chat box, I would love for this to be a conversation that will be helpful for all of you. So before I begin, I just want to introduce myself and say a little bit about who I am. So my name is Sarah Wong, and I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii. I moved to California for college, and then I went to Oregon for my graduate degree in psychology. I definitely missed home and the islands when I was in school, so I returned right when I could, and I completed my psychology internship at the VA here in Hawaii. And so I always saw myself in a career working with veterans and found it was just a natural fit between my interests and career goals. So I decided to stay at this VA for my residency, which is where I'm at right now, my training. And so professionally, I really enjoy working with older adults and providing care to rural areas. I'm also really interested in finding ways that we can reduce barriers to care to make sure that, people who do live in harder to reach areas are still getting access to needed healthcare, mental health care services that they deserve. And then also my free time, I love eating French fries. I enjoy running, doing yoga, and spending time with my dog and playing board games with my family. And then, sorry, that's me on the left. And then this is when I traveled to Guam and Saipan last year and gave talks too. I just want to give a picture to go along with the information.
Normally, during this time, Dr. Wong would have been here with us, but given the COVID restrictions, we wanted to still make it an opportunity to have her present and get the information anyways. But hopefully at some point, she'll be able to take a picture like that with us.
Thanks, Dr. McCutcheon. Yeah, hopefully I can make it out there to American Samoa soon. Okay, so, many of us here are involved in caring for others. And so what I really want to highlight during our talk today is the importance of taking care of yourself in order to care for those in need. I like to think of the analogy of flying in the airplane, and when the stewardess reminds us to put on an oxygen mask before we put on the oxygen masks of those around us, or before we put on the mask on children. So I think this really highlights the importance of taking care of ourselves in order to provide the best care for other people. if we're not caring for ourselves, our ability to provide for others will be limited. So please remember to take care of yourselves and encourage others around you to practice self-care too. It really helps to sustain our ability to care for those in need. So if you are helping to care for someone and you are concerned with their memory, there are some things you can be on the lookout for. If someone is experiencing mild memory difficulties, it may be harder for them to learn new things, to recall certain words in conversations, or to find everyday things like their classes. And to a certain extent, we all face mild memory difficulties as we age. It's part of the aging process, that some of our brain functioning becomes slower than usual, and it takes a bit longer to find certain words or to recall some information. But if someone is experiencing more serious changes in their memory, it becomes much harder to do everyday things. So for example, it may be harder to drive around because it's harder to remember the route, or it's harder to react to certain things on the road. Our reaction times might be slower, and we may feel more flustered with remembering how to get to certain places. It can also be harder to shop at the market or the grocery store. We may forget the items we needed, or we may forget why we even went to the store in the first place. It can also be harder to cook because we're forgetting the steps for certain recipes that we've been making for a while, or we're having trouble remembering things about safety in the kitchen too. So we might be forgetting to turn off the stove. We may also be having more difficulties having everyday conversations with our friends. If we're caregiving for someone who is having memory difficulties, the person we're caring for may feel more embarrassed with not being able to remember certain things that are being brought up in conversation. And so they may often pretend to just keep up with the conversation when inside they may feel confused about what their friends or loved ones are talking to them about. On the other hand, too, we may also notice that we are having to repeat ourselves to our loved ones. We might find that they are asking the same questions over and over again because they're not really remembering our previous conversations. So for example, they may be asking us time and time again what day it is or when their next appointment is, even though we might have just told them a few moments ago. When someone is experiencing more serious changes in their memory too, there may be difficulties with becoming confused with their current surroundings. So this can look like becoming lost in places that the person knows well, or they're having a hard time following simple directions. It can also look like being confused about the time of the day or the time of the year, or they might be confused about people they once knew very well. And so memory difficulties also become more serious when it impacts someone's ability to take care of themselves. So if they're having difficulties remembering, for example, what they ate or if they took a shower, people might start to show difficulties with hygiene. They might be eating poorly, not brushing their teeth, and they might also be engaging in unsafe practices like forgetting to lock the door, or like I mentioned before, forgetting to turn off the stove.
And there may also be some, they might also not be aware as well in terms of the changes that are happening. So others around them might see some of those changes with the memory, but themselves may not have when it gets to a more serious level. And you think about our roadways here, right? They're pretty simple to get around, but when you're seeing that they're getting lost, and even here with the one-way streets, then that's something to look out for and be concerned about.
Yeah, so here's another comparison slide showing the differences between normal aging and when memory impairments become more concerning. So for example, with normal aging, making a poor decision once in a while is completely normal. But with more serious memory impairments, we find that we might be making poor judgments and decisions most of the time, more often than not. So we might notice that the person we're caring for is not taking showers, or they're making questionable decisions while they're out on the road. And so we just see that there more poor judgments are happening more often throughout the day. Also with normal aging, it's totally normal to just miss a payment once in a while, but when more serious memory impairments happen, there may be problems taking care of monthly bills to the extent that, again, the health and safety becomes into question. So this might look like forgetting to pay rent, or becoming really behind with our debt. And so just an accumulation of financial concerns. Also, with normal aging, it is normal to occasionally forget what time it is or what day it is, but then be able to remember it later. With more serious memory impairments, we often see that the people we're caring for, they lose track of the date or the time, and the year also might be really hard for them to recall. So oftentimes we might ask them what year it is, and sometimes we'll see that they're saying it's 2018 or 2016, which is around the same time that the memory impairments started to happen. So we see generally a disorientation in the current day and time. Also with normal aging, it's totally normal to sometimes forget which word that we use. I struggle to find words in conversation all the time, but with more serious memory impairments, it really impacts someone's ability to be engaging in conversations with other people. They might even feel really, really flustered that they can't find the word, and then they want to just not talk at all. And so they tend to withdraw from like social conversations too. And then with normal aging, we might lose things from time to time. It's very common for us to misplace our keys, our wallet, our phone. But with memory impairments, it might become, again, so serious memory impairments, we might be losing things to the point where it's affecting our health and safety again. So we might be losing our keys, and we might be losing them in public areas. And so, someone in the public might have access to our house keys. And so just misplacing things to the point where it is affecting our health and safety. Okay, so now that, before we go into some causes of memory difficulties, I just want to check in. I know that we just went over a lot of information and see if anyone has any questions right now, or if anyone wants to share signs that they've noticed coming up frequently with people they take care of and noticing common signs of memory problems.
Dr. Wong, would you mind going back to the slide before?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that might help cue.
Thank you. Okay,
and feel free to put it into the chat if there are things that come up along the way. That sometimes it could be overwhelming seeing some of this information and then pairing it with thinking about your loved one, or even maybe some things that you may be picking up for yourself. So take the time that you need, and if things come up later, please feel free to chat. Yeah. So Sherry had mentioned everything Dr. Wong has covered is what she's currently dealing with. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Is that dealing with in terms of caring for someone, or things you're also just personally noticing, if you don't mind sharing? And is there a specific age that one starts forgetting here and there? Yeah, so that's a very good question. There's no specific age that we can expect to see this onset of memory difficulties. Just generally as we do get older, though, just natural changes in the brain, we can expect to just see harder, needing a little bit more time to learn things and recall things. So there's no generally a specific age, but federal and research guidelines say that we reach older adult age after 65. But again, reaching the age of 65 or being older than 65 is definitely not a definitive age of you're definitely going to be experiencing these difficulties.
Sherry had mentioned too that my mom is 78 years old and she's retired over 10 years ago. She's now thinking it's Sunday every day.
Yeah. So it gets upset. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing. So oftentimes we see that after big life changes like retirement is when we do see more changes with memory, because when we're working, we have a set routine, set schedule, and it helps to anchor with orientation on what day it is, what year it is. And then with a big change of retirement and not working, it is very common that we do start to see that people become a little bit more confused about what day it is. Thank you for sharing. That's all very, very common.
Dr. Wong?
Yes.
I just wanted to comment on what Sherry was saying about her mom and how she thinks every day is Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
and because um, because I know Sherry goes to church together with Dr. Eta, and I see Monica Miller taking pictures every Sunday of people that come to church, and I see a lot of pictures like Sherry's mom and a lot of the other older ladies that go to church, and they all seem happy. So I'm thinking, could that be like why she thinks that Sunday is every day, because it's that positive, that fun memory that she just wants to remember. I mean, it seems like if Sherry's saying that her mom thinks that Sunday's every day, it seems like going to church is like one of the happy memories she has, and that every day that's what she's thinking about.
Yeah, I think thank you for sharing that. I think that's very I wouldn't be surprised if that was going on. I think that's very helpful insight that you shared, Judy, of um, yeah, oftentimes we try to retain to memories that help our mood and help us
Mm,
feel good. And so it makes sense, right? If Sunday is a social day and one that your mom looks forward to, that's where her mind is anchoring. So yeah, just it really helps with visual reminders of calendars or things on post-it notes throughout the house to just provide those reminders to your
mhm,
mom. And if Sunday is a good anchoring day for your mom's mind, maybe saying like 6 more days till church, 5 more days to church, things like that. Because again, it sounds like we have a tendency, our minds have a tendency to want to latch on to things that have positive meaning for us.
mm. Thank you.
And I will say it's nice to know that Sherry's on here because Sherry's not the only one. There are other caregivers as well who are dealing with similar situations but may not know what to do, and there are limited resources here. So it's really good. Thank you for the information so far.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. This is exactly, I just want to make it as helpful. And so please continue just to type in the chat as we go along. Yeah, so now that we've talked about some warning signs to what to look out for, we may be asking ourselves what causes memory difficulties to happen in the first place. So one thing, like I mentioned before, is age. Just as we get older, certain parts of our brain just change, especially those areas that are important for learning and other complex brain activities. And so forgetfulness can be a normal part of aging. As we get older, the changes occur all over our body, including our brain. And so just as a result, some people may notice that it takes longer to learn new things. It's more difficult to remember new information as well as we did before, like when we were in school. Or we might just be noticing that we're misplacing things a little bit more often. But again, I want to highlight that increasing age does not 100% mean that there's going to be negative outcomes for our brains. Aging also brings about a lot of positive cognitive brain changes too. So for example, there's been many studies that have shown that older adults have more extensive vocabularies. They have a greater depth of knowledge from all of their life experiences as compared to, younger adults. And so older adults also have, a lifetime of accumulated knowledge and experiences too. And so again, while age is a risk factor for having memory impairments, it's definitely not 100% guarantee. And also with increasing age, there's also a lot of positive things that are going on in our brain as well. Another thing that can contribute to memory difficulties is difficulties with depression, stress, anxiety, or just managing difficult, uncomfortable emotions. So distress, anxiety, depression can make a person feel more forgetful. So for example, someone who's recently retired or someone who is coping with the death of a spouse, relative, or friend may just naturally feel sad, lonely, worried, or bored. And so trying to deal with these major life changes just leaves naturally some people to feel confused or forgetful. And so the confusion and forgetfulness caused by emotions or depression, stress, or anxiety are usually temporary and will go away typically when the feelings fade or when the feelings are managed. And also it can help with having a supportive network of friends and family. But if these difficulties do persist for longer than a couple weeks, a couple months, it is important to reach out for help so we can better manage our stress, anxiety, depression. Another thing that is known to be contributing to memory difficulties is not eating enough healthy foods. So a healthy diet is proven to influence heart health, which relates to our brain health, right? So our brain relies on the blood that circulates through our body. So a healthy diet can reduce the risks of many chronic diseases such as heart disease or diabetes. And so it can also help keep our brain healthy in turn. So, for example, high fat, high sodium foods can lead to health problems like heart disease or diabetes, which can then be harmful to the brain.
And Dr. Wong, I really want to emphasize this because this is one of the areas that we struggle with non-communicable diseases here in Samoa. The foods, if we went back to the foods that we ate, that our ancestors ate, it might be a little bit different. But, things like bisupo and the fried chicken and all of those things can really impact us. And it's something that we're seeing our people are eating a lot of. And we're in the top 5 most obese countries in the world, and this kind of thing that's happening I think we forget sometimes that it has an impact on our mental health too and our well-being.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that insight, Dr. McCutcheon. Yeah, so just prioritizing a healthy diet. Again, if our blood is healthy, our cardiovascular health is healthy, then our brain will also be healthy too. And then another factor that affects, that might cause some memory difficulties is alcohol, right? So if we're drinking too much alcohol affects, our brain's ability to stay sharp and healthy. If we're consuming too much, our memory functioning will be compromised. And drinking too much alcohol affects our brain by just slowing or impairing communication among our cells. So this can lead to slurred speech, fuzzy memories, drowsiness. Also, there's long-term consequences too of drinking alcohol in excess, which can lead to changes in coordination, in memory impairments, and difficulties with body coordination and managing emotions too. So staying away from alcohol can reverse some of these changes. It's also important to note that as we age, we become more sensitive to alcohol's effects too. So the same amount of alcohol that we might have been drinking in our 20s or 30s has a different effect and a greater effect than someone who is older, so someone who's in their 70s or 80s. So again, just be mindful of the effects of alcohol, and also because alcohol has adverse effects with certain medications. So just be mindful of the effects of alcohol, especially in excess. Another factor that can cause some memory difficulties is head injury. So if we do have a traumatic brain injury or if we fall, it can cause damage to our brain, and it can cause difficulties concentrating, difficulties recalling information too. So it's again, something important to note too is that older adults are at higher risks of accidents and falls. And so we just want to make sure that the environment is safe to prevent head injuries too. Another thing that can contribute to memory difficulties is just bad reactions to medicines. So some medicines and drugs do have side effects that can cause confusion, memory loss, hallucinations, or delusions, especially in older adults. And so if this is something that you're noticing with either yourself or your loved one, we just want to encourage you to talk to your doctor just in case there are potential side effects that might be contributing to the things that you're noticing with your brain and your memory functioning. Again, like I mentioned, bad heart health can contribute to memory difficulties. Like I said, our brain really relies on our blood supply. And so if our blood isn't healthy, so if we have high blood pressure, a stroke, diabetes, then that affects the blood that's being circulated with our brain. So we really want to be making sure that we're maintaining our heart health too. And then another important factor that can really contribute to our memory functioning is if we've ever experienced abuse or trauma in our lives.
There are times where if people have experienced trauma or of some, they may have a hard time really remembering or recalling some of the information, key information from their traumatic experiences. But then if you think about it, and if you're always constantly on guard, the idea is that what you remember is the things that you retain, right? Are the things that you pick up on. But if you didn't have it to begin with, you can't recall it. Right. And so when we're always kind of on guard, or when there are things that are happening to us and makes it difficult to pay attention, then we aren't paying attention to much, and then there's nothing that's really in that container to pull back from.
Yeah, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, I'll go over a little bit more about different types of abuse and how, being a survivor of abuse and trauma can contribute to memory difficulties. So there are several types of abuse. So there's physical abuse, and that happens when someone causes bodily harm by hitting, pushing, slapping, or keeping someone against their will with restraints. There's also emotional abuse. It's also sometimes called psychological abuse. So it can look like someone saying hurtful words, like yelling, threatening, or repeatedly ignoring someone. Keeping someone from seeing their close friends and relatives is another form of emotional abuse too. And neglect occurs when caregivers do not respond to the person they're responsible for and do not care for their needs. So this can look like parents neglecting their children's basic needs, or caregivers neglecting the needs of their older adult patients or loved ones. So this can look like physical, emotional, or social needs, or withholding food, medications, or access to health care. Abandonment is leaving someone alone without planning for their care. And sexual abuse involves unwanted sexual attention in the form of verbal remarks or physical touching. Financial abuse happens when money or belongings are stolen, so it can include forging checks, taking someone else's retirement or social security benefits, or using a person's credit cards or bank accounts without their permission. It can also include changing names on a will, bank account, life insurance policy without someone's permission. And so like Dr. McCutcheon was saying, it's important to be mindful of the different types of abuse that exists for a couple of reasons. So first, if we're caregivers and we've experienced these things ourselves, it's important to check in with ourselves to make sure we're getting the help we need, to recover from these incidents and to get the support we need to be effective caregivers. And second, if we are providing care for older adults, it's good to be mindful of these different types of abuse or traumas, because oftentimes people will target older adults in their community, knowing that older adults are a more vulnerable population to target as victims. And so just some warning signs of abuse to be mindful
And
of.
of note, this is something recent that's happened.
Oh, sorry, Dr. McCutcheon, do you want to say more?
With regards to the financial abuse, that's something that recently was passed as well. It was another bill here locally to recognize that as another form of abuse. So.
Yeah, yes, we oftentimes don't realize that financial abuse is a form of abuse, but it is something especially to be mindful of. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Sounds like there has been progress made with recognizing financial abuse more so. And so there's just some signs that you can be mindful of just to take note if you are taking care of someone who might be a victim of abuse. And so some signs are not taking part in activities that someone used to enjoy before. They might look messier with unwashed hair or dirtier clothes. They might have difficulty sleeping. They might be losing or gaining weight for no reason. They also might become more withdrawn or irritable or more violent towards others. There might be also unexplained marks on their body, like bruises or scratches or bumps. When you ask them, they're not really able to articulate how they got those marks on their body. And there might also be signs of insufficient care or having unpaid bills despite having, enough resources to take care of their finances.
So Dr. Wong, Sherry had just asked, can you explain financial abuse more? Please explain that.
Okay. Yeah, so financial abuse is really when someone's manipulated in losing control of their own finances. So this can look like a variety of things. So it might look like purely someone stealing someone else's money. It can look like, changing the name on someone's earned retirement account onto someone else's name. It can look like changing the name under the bank account without someone's permission. It can look like changing important legal documents like life insurance, without someone's permission, all because the person who is exploiting the victim is trying to gain access to someone's finances.
Mm-hmm. So they may be the ones that, they come around only when they want something. So they'll come around and then they'll befriend your loved one, and then maybe have them go and buy all the things that they want, but then in any other time would not be around, kind of neglects them at other points, but only wants them for their financial means.
Dr. Wong,
Yes.
can I add on something with financial abuse? Because that's something that we normally talk about when we're talking about, that we normally include when we're talking about elderly abuse.
Mhm.
And with elderly abuse, it seems like most of those that are abusing their own elderlies are their very own children,
Mhm.
that normally take care of them. And so with financial abuse, sometimes we talk about how here locally they get their benefits like social security, they
Mhm.
monthly, on a monthly basis, where and then the children just take charge of those. And we find out sometimes that there are some of the elderlies that don't have enough money to get their own medication,
Mhm.
or the things that they need at this point of their life, where, and to find out that the benefits are being spent by their children and they don't know about that, or even like the other benefits, like the local food stamps,
Mhm.
because when a lot of things that our people don't realize is that with the food stamps, and as an elderly, those food stamps can allow you to buy the nutritional stuff that you need, as for your diet at that age. But a lot of our people, our children, just buy the food that everybody else eats, and then they expect our elderly to eat the same thing that everybody else is eating when they, and so some of them have that problem, the medical issues. And so I just wanted to include that, to mention that when you're talking about financial abuse, because that is something that we normally mention when we talk about elderly abuse. Yeah.
Yeah, buying the cheap
Yes,
materials as opposed to getting the things that they actually need.
absolutely.
Nice.
Hmm.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing that. I think it really highlights the importance of being mindful of these signs because, like I mentioned before, it is unfortunate, but older adults are just more vulnerable to financial abuse because, like Judy was saying, unfortunately, children know that it's easier to exploit their parents, at an older age, and so they're able to kind of use that parental relationship to manipulate their parents into using their money just for them, and so that it does become a very tricky, sticky situation, gray area of, what does the parent actually want to be providing for their children versus what is manipulative and what, at what level is the parent's needs not being met.
Sherry had just mentioned about, thanking you for providing that example,
Mhm.
because it sounds like it was something that her mom may have gone through. And thank you, Sherry, for taking care of that. And I think that's why we talk about these things, is to be aware of them, so that if you are starting to see those signs, that you can be proactive about it as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Sherry. And at the end of our presentation too, we'll be providing resources. So now that we have the knowledge base of like signs to look out for, if you notice those signs ever happening again, to reach out to those local resources, and to get support with managing that, because yeah, it is unfortunate that it is very common, especially with the older adult population, and we wouldn't want you to be managing it that all on your own. Okay. So now that we've gone through some things, different types of abuse, um, we might be asking, like, how can trauma and abuse really be impacting our memory? So surviving abuse of any kind can make it harder to concentrate on things, which makes it harder to remember topics of conversations you might be having with family or friends, or just things that you need to do on an everyday kind of level. So for example, um, with the example of financial abuse, right? Like if we're being manipulated and we don't have enough money to take care of our basic needs, it's going to be much harder to concentrate on the tasks that you have, the errands that you need to complete, and it might just also be harder to remember everything that you need to be mindful of because your basic needs are being threatened. Um, with trauma and abuse too, it can be harder to relax because everything that the person has been through. So difficulties relaxing can cause difficulties, with falling asleep. And someone may have a harder time falling asleep because their minds, are really busy and racing, trying to cope with what they've been through. We might be lying in bed just trying to problem solve, like, how can I get access to my money again? Or what does this mean about me and my family? That someone has kind of manipulated us and exploited, our money and resources. And if someone is not getting as much sleep, then their energy levels throughout the day may be lower, which then leaves less resources for our brains and our minds to handle, again, those everyday tasks and activities. So just with the lack of energy and the difficulties concentrating, our brains are just going to have fewer resources to cope with everything that we have to problem solve on a day-to-day basis. So overall, going through abuse and trauma can really significantly impact someone's memory functioning. It can contribute to global difficulties with thinking and memory. And like Dr. McCutcheon was mentioning earlier, also after experiencing abuse and trauma, memory loss is very, very common and just a natural survival skill and defense mechanism that we develop to protect ourselves from further psychological damage and to prevent like further hurt and also try to prevent it from ever happening again. So it's, again, just a natural mechanism that our brain kind of goes through to cope with the abuse and trauma that we've been through. So, victims of violence, sexual abuse, financial abuse, other emotionally abusive events can lead to amnesia or difficulties remembering the events of abuse, which really might help a person to cope by allowing them to temporarily forget the details of everything they've been through. So with this type of memory loss, a person might suppress memories of a traumatic event until they're ready to handle them. So again, we just wanted to highlight how abuse might impact our memory functioning, because if we're, a caregiver and we've also experienced trauma, we want to be mindful of the difficulties that you might be going through as a caregiver. And, again, it's important to be aware of the things that may be more difficult for you and just to know that it's okay. Just knowing and honoring what you've been through is a crucial step in taking care of yourself, again, so you can take care of others. And also, we just want to be mindful too, if the person we are taking care of are themselves a victim of abuse, what to look out for so we can best support them too. Okay. So now that we've gone through some things that we know contribute to difficulties with memory, I want to just spend some time now on how we can support our brain health to potentially minimize those difficulties with memory that we were just mentioning. So what is brain health? Brain health refers to how well our brain functions across several different areas. So different aspects of brain health include cognitive health. And so this is like how well we think, learn, and remember things. And then motor function is how well we make and control our movements, like our balance. So how well we're able to control our bodies. So this can look like being able to walk without assistance, or it might look like being able to hold a pen and not having any difficulties writing like we used to. Another important aspect of brain health is emotional functioning. So this is, how well we're able to manage, interpret, and respond to emotions, both pleasant and unpleasant. And then another aspect of brain health is tactile function. So this is just how well we feel and respond to our different sensations, like touch. So including like how we respond to pressure, pain, and temperature. So again, just very holistic brain health of like how our sensory functions are operating too.
And it makes sense too when you're thinking about memory and how sometimes when we're learning new things that we don't just use one part of our brain to remember. There are different things that are happening and different strategies we all use to help us remember different things. Some of them internal and some of them, movements or things like that we might do. So.
Yeah, like for example, like a memory I have growing up is my grandmother's cooking. So it's not just the actual memory of being in her apartment and having her cook breakfast for me. I'm also like smelling, the eggs and the bacon that she used to make, and also brings up emotional memories too of just nostalgia. So yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up, because like Dr. McCutcheon was saying, brain health is not just factual memory, it's just a holistic ways that our brain kind of integrates all of this information. Yeah, so in this slide, we can see that brain health can be affected by many age-related changes, but there's a growing body of research that suggests that we can take certain steps to maintain our brain and cognitive health. And so these small changes can really add up, so it can really help support our brain functioning and the brain functioning of people that we care about too. So the first step in taking care of your brain health is to take care of your physical health. So the relationship between our physical health and brain health is so important. Again, like I was saying before, as an example, is if our heart health is healthy, then the chances that our brain health is going to be healthy too is very strong, because again, those two systems are very related. So ways we can prioritize our medical health is to make sure that we're getting our recommended health screening. So we're making sure that we're going to our doctors on a regular basis and not holding off on those medical appointments for too many years, because if we do that, then a lot of our health problems can accumulate and we might not be paying attention to really important parts of our health.
So what that would look like here is some of us wait until we go to the ER when, it's kind of like it's a last minute thing, but primary care is here. And so being able to have that at least once a year annual checkup, if not more, around your birthday, I think that's the best way to help you remember. So primary care at Department of Health is a good way to get those routine screens.
Yeah, and then if you're caregiving for someone, making sure that they're also going to those routine screens with their primary care too. And then making sure that, chronic health problems like diabetes, high blood pressure, depression, high cholesterol, they're being managed on an ongoing basis. Like Dr. McCutcheon was saying, not waiting until those chronic health problems accumulate to the point that we have to go to the ER for attention for them. You also might want to consult with your healthcare provider or your loved one's healthcare provider about medicines they're taking, just to talk about if there are possible side effects that might be impacting their memory and thinking abilities. We also want to be reducing risks for brain injuries due to falls and other accidents, so that we again want to make sure that the home is a really safe environment. So, making sure that if there are steps that someone has access to, like a handrail or something they can hold on to while they are walking, again, to minimize the risk of a fall. Again, we want to limit the use of alcohol, quit smoking if you are currently smoking, or if your loved one is currently smoking. There's a large body of evidence showing that nicotine and tobacco products have negative effects on our lungs, on our heart health. And so again, if our lungs and our heart aren't operating at its maximum efficiency, then our brain also will be impacted too. And then, yeah.
No, and then in terms of the smoking too, just being aware of secondhand smoke and how dangerous that could be too, because a lot of us will think about others who are smoking, but then when we're around it, that could also have a significantly more impact on us as well, because we don't have the filter that the person who's smoking has as well. So you're getting all of the other carcinogens too exposed to.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And oftentimes when we are around people who are smoking, we think it might not be a big deal because we're not ourselves smoking. But again, the effects of secondhand smoke are, as important as someone if we are smoking too. And then we also want to make sure that we're getting enough sleep. So generally the recommendation is 7 to 8 hours each night. We're all different people, so this amount might look different for each person. But again, just making sure that we're not just getting 2 to 3 hours a night, but making sure that we're feeling at least well rested. Again, because when our brain gets enough rest throughout the night, then we're able to have more energy to solve the problems, and making sure our brain has enough resources on a day-to-day basis.
And part of those could also be sleep apnea. And so other issues like sleep apnea or restless leg syndrome, that those are things that you wouldn't know unless you went to do your routine health screenings too, right? So that not having enough oxygen could also impact your memory and impact your ability to sleep effectively.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank Dr. Ita for mentioning that, because there are so many in the community now that have sleep apnea. I myself am one, and I think a lot of us do not do not understand or don't realize that ripple effect that it has, and that how it plays a big role on memory loss. Yeah, so thank you for mentioning that, Dr. Ita.
Yeah, so please get your checkups for those too, and your CPAP machine if you can.
I know, huh?
Yeah, so along with sleep and making sure that we're getting checked out for sleep apnea, we also want to be making sure that we are maintaining good blood pressure. So we want to control high blood pressure if we do have high blood pressure. Not only does it help your heart, but it also, again, will help our brain. There's been studies that have shown that having high blood pressure in our midlife increases the risks for us developing memory decline later in life. So if you do know you have high blood pressure, if your family has a history of high blood pressure, again, make sure that you're checking in with your doctor to make sure that you're having routine checkups to make sure that it's not going up more than it's expected to. And also your doctor might suggest medicines or exercises or changes in your diet to help with the blood pressure or the blood pressure of your loved one. So again, making sure that we're paying attention to all of our systems in our body, again, because it all helps our brain health.
But very relevant, high blood pressure and hypertension and diabetes are two very big issues that we face here. So yeah.
Yeah, so these were steps, again, in talking about how to support our brain health. The first step is, again, to prioritize our medical health. And then the second step is we can eat healthy foods. So a healthy diet can reduce the risks of many chronic diseases, again, like heart disease or diabetes. So it's very important to keep our brain healthy. So in general, a healthy diet consists of fruits and vegetables like whole grains, lean meats, fish, and poultry, low fat or non-fat dairy products. Also want to limit like solid fats, sugar, and salt. And also we want to be sure to control portion sizes and be drinking enough water and other fluids.
And it's very interesting because we're blessed with a lot of access to those types of fruits and vegetables or fruits around our area and our island. And so the emphasis on that, I think, is really important. And being able to, you go to the States and buy a essie, and the essie's $5 or $6, and you can get your papaya essie here for $1 or $2. So if not, find it in the backyard. So those kinds of things that we have access to are probably are going to be a lot better for us than some of the other things that you find in in the stores.
Yeah, eat those fresh fruits and vegetables. And so you might be thinking like, how could what we eat affect our brains? And so, it's possible that eating a certain diet affects the biological mechanisms going on in our body. So it can affect things like making sure we're not having like an inflamed diet, making sure that we're getting enough antioxidants, things like that, because like Dr. McCutcheon was saying, if we're not getting enough oxygen, then we can get headaches and sleep apnea. Similar with our diet too, there's certain foods that can lead to oxidative stress, which is just something that will negatively affect our brain functioning. So again, there's the foods that we eat, the foods that we're putting in our body have a really strong relationship with the mechanisms and things that are going on in our body, which again will affect how our brain is feeling too.
And we think about hypertension and high blood pressure, the high salt foods, and even with our sugar and the things that we have that we might be more likely to go towards are not necessarily going to be helpful for us overall. So, and we didn't have dairy products aside from coconut milk available to us in our ancestors earlier on. So it's interesting to think about what our ancestors were eating and how we can continue to use that as opposed to the things that are foreign to our bodies and to our environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Like processed foods like potato chips and things with a lot of chemicals in them and things that get shipped from far away, there's a lot of chemicals that are in the foods to make sure that they can last a certain amount of time. But again, if we think back to what our ancestors ate, there wasn't any of those things. And so just going back to, again, the fresh fruits and vegetables, the papayas in our yard, it's likely going to help with our brain health and our heart health and everything. So another step in supporting our brain health is to maintain physical activity. So there's studies that are linking ongoing physical activity with benefits for our brain and cognition and memory. So with regular exercise, like doing household chores, just like vacuuming or just sweeping, just walking around the house a lot or other activities, it has many benefits. So just moving around a little is better than just sitting around in our chairs and our couches. So this can be really beneficial too when we're caring for maybe an older adult. They might want to just sit down and not want to move around a lot, but just encouraging them to get up maybe every hour just to walk to the kitchen with you. That's better than just letting them stay put in their chair.
For my auntie, she's someone who's older, and yet she loves to be outside doing her plants. And so a lot of people will say, she shouldn't be doing that. But for us, we really encourage her to go out and do those because one, it helps with the anxiety and the depression, and then two, it helps her to keep her mind on something and keep her mind active. So we encourage her always to go and do her plants and stay and do her garden.
Yeah, thank you so much for that example. There's just so many different creative ways, that we can think of just to get our bodies moving, and planting is definitely a good example. Even silly things like dancing around the house or just, finding ways that we can be social too with the people that we live with, just to get our bodies moving. Because like with physical activity, there's many benefits. It can help improve our strength, it can help us have more energy, it can help improve our balance. It can prevent or delay heart disease, diabetes, or other medical concerns. It can also, like Dr. McCutcheon was saying, perk up our mood and help with the anxiety and depression. In one study, exercise was found to help the brain maintain old network connections and also help make new connections between cells. So it's really important for cognitive health. Other studies have shown that exercise helps to actually increase the size of certain brain areas that are really important for memory and learning. So again, just there's so many positive benefits to physical activity. So federal guidelines recommend that adults get at least 2.5 hours of physical activity each week. And so a good aim or a good anchor is just to think about like 30 minutes on most days. And walking is a really good start. So we don't have to go all out and have to think of a whole new exercise regimen, but just really starting off small, just like walking around, to the end of the street and back with your loved one, or just walking around the house with them too. Bingo. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to talk about that really soon. But bingos, because you are sitting down, unless you're doing you're standing up playing bingo and you're jumping up and down each time you get bingo. Bingo would be more of a mentally stimulating activity. And so we're going to go over that very soon. But yeah, thank you for answering that. But that's also a very good activity that you want to be engaging in. So another step is keeping your mind active. So being, intellectually or mentally engaged can have a lot of good benefits for your brain. So people who engage in personally meaningful activities, such as volunteering or hobbies, say they feel happier and healthier. So for your bingo example, right, if it's personally meaningful, if it's something that you get to do with your family and friends, if it's something that you have a lot of good memories around, of course, continue engaging in bingo. Also, if it's something that you haven't played much, learning new skills may improve your thinking ability too. So just challenging your brain with bingo or other new activities will also be really important. So one study found that, older adults who learned new skills like quilting or knitting or digital photography had more memory improvement than those who didn't learn new activities. So again, just highlights the importance of making sure that we are keeping our minds engaged. Oftentimes older adults might just want to sit and like not talk to anyone and just watch TV, which is a very passive activity. But we want to be presenting them with activities that will challenge their brain so that the connections between the cells are active, because if we're not using them, then we're going to lose them. So even just small things like word puzzles or word finds, quilting, bingo, all keeps our brains thinking and active. Yes, reading. Yeah, so lots of activities can keep our mind active. So reading books, magazines, playing board games, taking or teaching a class, working or volunteering, they're all very good activities. So yes, we really want to encourage reading, anything that keeps our brain thinking, problem solving, learning new things. Thank you.
And
That was
you,
my question.
and I think also you want to gauge it too. If it's something that becomes more frustrating than helpful, then that's something that you want to maybe look about seeing into switching. Yeah, because for some it may be more frustrating over time, something that they may have enjoyed before. But yeah, all of those activities sound really good. And one example, and I'm sorry, Sherry, if I'm putting out there, but I always see Sherry out with her mom and taking, those social outings with one or two other friends every Saturday. And so I think that that's such a nice thing, a socially meaningful, personally meaningful activity that I think that is really enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for mentioning that. Like everything I'm talking about, want to be thinking in moderation and in balance, right? We won't want to be forcing our loved ones to learn these new things just because we think that they're supposed to be doing it. We still want everyone to be enjoying what they're doing. So again, if it's reading, making sure it's things that like we're actually interested in and we're not feeling forced, because there's such a strong relationship between our mood too and our brain health. And so if we're unhappy and getting frustrated with these new skills, we don't want to continue engaging in it too. So finding activities that keep our mind active and also help us just enjoy the activities too. The next step in keeping our brain healthy is just staying connected socially, right? So connecting with other people through social activities and community programs can really help keep our brain active and help us feel less isolated, more engaged with the world around us. So participating in social activities can really reduce the risk for some health problems and help improve well-being. So just like bingo or on Saturdays having walks with our friends, very, very important activities to make sure that we are still with our support systems and getting that support that we need. Research has found that people who engage in personally meaningful and productive social activities with others do tend to live longer, and they have improved mood and a sense of purpose, which is really, really helpful, especially in our older adult years. Studies have shown that activities help, again, to maintain well-being and improve brain functioning. So just continue visiting with family and friends, consider volunteering for a local organization, or just start a new group between, your neighbors, just again, to promote that social connection with your community and the people that mean a lot to you.
It's interesting because, and maybe Dr. Wong would touch on it more, with music, I've had other people where I've played old Samoan songs for them, and then all of a sudden they start singing. They may not have been, they may not have been as verbal, but then they hear these old Samoan songs and made them think about, their earlier days, and then all of a sudden they started talking about things that they did when they were younger, because it can cue those same kinds of state dependent, what was happening at that time. So even things like music could have such a powerful impact.
Yeah, the research has shown that music and memories that elicit like certain of our senses, like I was mentioning before, like the smell of my grandmother's cooking, it's stored in deep areas of our brain. And so while we might be having difficulties remembering what day it is or just learning new things, those memories are so embedded, and there are also so like emotionally tied to. And so when we do remember meaningful music, it is common that, we do see improved moods too. And it's often memories that we're able to recall even when we're having difficulties with other things.
Yeah, Sherry was suggesting opening a daycare center for our seniors. yeah, maybe it would be something. I think TAOA does do some things, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But yeah, good point.
So the next step in managing our brain health is just to, again, reduce the risks that we know can lead to difficulties with memory impairment. So this is kind of just a good overview slide of everything that we've talked about, right? So we talked about a lot of the risks that we know can lead to difficulties with memory and thinking. So we want to, again, be engaging in all of those tips that we just talked about to make sure that our brain health is maintained. So making sure that our heart health is healthy, we're taking care of our mood and our emotions. If we are feeling more depressed or anxious, we're checking in with our doctors about medicines that we're worried about, or we want to just talk about just to make sure there's no side effects. Making sure we're engaging in physical activity, eating healthy, not smoking, not drinking too much alcohol, getting enough sleep, and making sure that we're still active with our community and the people that we care about. Okay. So now that we spent some time going over how to support, our brain health or the brain health of those we care about or are taking care of, just want to spend some time on how to support yourself if you are caring for someone who is going through memory difficulties. So as caregivers, we've luckily chosen our work because of the rewards of being able to help others. And so compassion satisfaction here is about the pleasure we derive from being able to do our work well. For example, feeling like it's a pleasure to help others through our work. We might feel positive about, our work, our colleagues, and our ability to contribute to the work setting or the greater good, or just being able to contribute to helping our loved one get through everything that they've been going through with their health. So that's one type of quality of life factor, right? Like compassion satisfaction, when we do feel rewarded for our work. Another component of quality of life could be compassion fatigue. And so this develops when showing compassion towards others becomes a burden and becomes very draining. So this can happen for a variety of reasons, but it's often common because of the nature of our work, and just helping others puts us in situations where we commonly see or hear about ongoing suffering, about people we really, really care about. So just the nature of our helping profession that we might develop compassion fatigue when we've been striving for compassion satisfaction. So compassion fatigue can lead to burnout. So burnout is associated with feelings of hopelessness and difficulties in dealing with our work or doing our job effectively or providing care effectively. These negative feelings usually have a gradual onset, and they can reflect the feeling that all of the efforts we're making aren't having any difference, or it can just feel like we're just have a very high workload and not a very supportive environment for ourselves. Then another component of compassion fatigue is secondary trauma. So secondary trauma means it's like secondary exposure to an extremely traumatic or abusive or stressful event. So this can look like we're caring for someone and they themselves have been through something really, really traumatic, like the person we're caring for has been a victim of extreme financial abuse, and they lost a lot of their resources, and we were providing care for them all throughout that whole time. And so we might develop secondary trauma because we're so emotionally invested in providing care for this person, that we start to have our own kind of adverse or negative reaction to everything that the person we care for is going through. And it's just natural because again, we're in this helping profession, and we care so much and we put so much time and energy in helping our loved ones. And when we see them going through difficult things, we might develop secondary trauma. So signs of, compassion fatigue, burnout, and secondary trauma can look like feeling burdened, blaming others, isolating yourself, having a loss of pleasure, difficulties concentrating, difficulties going to sleep, being just fatigued or very, very tired, both physically and emotionally. You might be bottling up your emotions. You might have feelings of hopelessness. You might notice that you're complaining more about your work or your life than normal. You also might notice other behaviors like overeating, not eating enough. You might be turning to alcohol more. You might not be engaging in self-care. So we just want to be mindful, in our caregiver roles of potential signs that we might notice with ourselves. Again, just to have that self-awareness so that we do notice like, oh, I'm not getting enough sleep as I usually am. I think I might be having some early signs of compassion fatigue. And then with those like early signs of self-awareness, we can like then check in with ourselves of like, okay, what do I need to take care of myself?
And if you go back to what Dr. Wong had presented on earlier, a lot of these signs and symptoms are very similar to what she was talking about or describing with memory changes. And so all of these things can then have this cyclical effect where we're caring for someone else, but then we experience all that burnout and fatigue. We're not getting enough sleep, and then our memories can be our memory functioning can be impacted. And also, the ideas about abuse that we talked about earlier, it can place you at increased risk place anybody who's a caregiver at increased risk for doing the same behaviors that we would want to try and avoid, like abuse or anger and reacting or lashing out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for mentioning that. Like Dr. McCudgeon was saying, it can be a very vicious cycle, right? Of we're trying to care for this person and then we get fatigued. And so then our brains, our own brains aren't, operating at its maximum efficiency. So we might be placing ourselves, at increased risk for having difficulties with thinking and memory. So again, we just want to show this slide so that we are mindful of the differences between compassion satisfaction versus compassion fatigue, because oftentimes when we're in the thick of it, we're in the thick of helping others, we are not checking in with ourselves. And so we don't know, like, am I getting satisfied from this work or am I getting burnt out?
So, Dr. Wong, secondary trauma, is that the same as like the term we normally use would be vicarious trauma?
Yes.
Is that the same?
Thank you so much for, yep. Okay. That's another term for vicarious trauma. Thank you so much.
Because I always like to, when people ask, well, tell me what vicarious trauma is, then I use my example that I always use is the secondhand smoking.
Yeah.
How it rubs off, like what Dr. Ito was saying before, earlier. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. So like we've mentioned, it's important to check in with yourself as you provide care for other people. We want to be the first to highlight that we know your job isn't easy. So it's really important and critical to take care of yourself. And so an important step in taking care of yourself is knowing your strengths and limitations. So it really helps with that self-awareness and being able to check in with yourself. So for example, when you think about your strengths, you can consider what you're particularly good at and how your skills might help with caregiving. So, are you good at finding information, keeping people up to date, communicating with other people in your community? Are you good with the phone? Are you comfortable with speaking to medical staff on behalf of your loved one? Really think about your strong suits so that, if you are working with, let's say, other family members or other siblings and taking care for your parents, then like what you want to take care of, and then what maybe you want your siblings, your brother, your sister to do, just knowing what you're good at. And so you also, on the other hand, want to think about, again, your limitations. So consider the warning signs that you do need a break, right? So when do you know that you are becoming stressed out? And when do you notice that you tend to get more stressed out? Do you get more stressed out when you have to communicate to your loved one? Do you get more stressed out when you do find yourself repeating yourself over and over again? And so just knowing like the things that do tend to burn yourself out more, again, is a good self-awareness check to make sure like, okay, like I noticed that I'm getting more frustrated with my loved one. So this is when I know that I have to just spend a little bit more time taking care of myself, or just, I know that this is a time when I need to reach out to someone and ask for help, and it's totally okay to ask for help. And that's actually like a strength because, we're in a community, and just as you want to help your loved one, there are a lot of people wanting to help you as well.
And I think sometimes as caregivers, especially when you're the closest one to your loved one, that we become overly protective, right? We become protective of them for good reason, and then we don't want to either burden other people. Those are some of the thoughts that could come up, or we don't trust other people to be able to take care of them, especially if you've experienced some kind of abuse, financial abuse by someone else. And I think just being able to be mindful of what happened, that we can only do so much as one person, that and any of us, even those of us who are trained in this field, can only do so much as one person. And really being able to identify who are those people that you can that can be supportive to you, or who is someone that an organization that you can reach out to, so that you have even a little bit of time for yourself.
Yeah, like we said in the very beginning, right? Knowing how to take care of yourself can really help our ability to take care of other people. So again, just thinking of that airplane analogy and having the stewardess tell us to put on our oxygen mask first, right? It's totally okay to take care of yourself, to reach out for help if you're noticing that you're experiencing burnout or compassion fatigue. So these are just some tips to continue providing care for those that you are currently caring for, who may be having memory impairments. Remember, it's important to help the person you're caring for feel supported. It's often easy for our stress to come out in the way that we communicate, and it's totally natural because what you're doing, again, is very hard. So these are just tips that help with maintaining that positive and supportive communication between you and your loved one. So the first is to provide reassurance, by either holding their hand or putting your arm around their shoulder and repeating in a calm and soothing voice, that everything will be okay. Oftentimes, the person that we're caring for might feel overwhelmed with all of these changes that are going on, not just with their memory and their thinking, but just even with their heart health or just their ability to get around and their mobility. And so they are going through a lot too, just as yourself. And so just providing that assurance that you're with them, and that physical touch of like everything will be okay can go a long way. And then don't argue or try to correct the person. Instead, affirm their experience and appropriately soothe and distract, right? So oftentimes, again, we might feel really, really frustrated because we just told our loved one that they have an appointment in 2 hours, and we might feel frustrated. We might become more snappy. But again, just being mindful of all of the things that they're going through, and oftentimes they can't help it. They can't help, but they can't remember what you told them. And they're not doing it to annoy you. They're not doing it against you. It's just something that's naturally going on in their brain. So as much as you can, just not argue with the person, because it can escalate the situation, and just being mindful that their difficulties with remembering what you told them is not because they're doing it on purpose. Another tip is to redirect attention and find outlets for anxious energy. So like Dr. Edo was saying, like with her auntie, to help with the anxiety, just going outside and finding ways to deal with the anxiety through managing, taking care of plants was a really good way of doing that. So you might find that yourself as a caregiver, as well as the person you're caring for, they're getting more anxious just with everything going on. So just find ways that we can release that energy. So taking walks together, or helping them, a lot of times older adults will say, like, I don't get to help out in a lot of tasks around the house anymore. So just finding little things that they can help out with, like making a to-do list with you or helping fold the laundry, just simple things that help them stay engaged. And then the next tip is to respond to the emotions being expressed and not just to the content of the words being spoken. So oftentimes, when we're having memory difficulties and word finding difficulties, it's hard to communicate what you're feeling, right? So if our parents are having difficulties with memory functioning, they might be feeling really, really frustrated with everything that's going on. And then on top of that, they might be feeling frustrated that they can't find the words to communicate that to you, right? But you can just tell, because you've spent so much time with them, that they are feeling frustrated, and you can tell by their nonverbals, their behaviors, just the look on their face, the emotions. And so it's really important to validate those emotions and saying, I see that you're frustrated, it's okay, right? So just validating the emotional experiences that they're going through too. And then lastly, another tip is just to prevent wandering by not leaving the person alone. And so this is particularly important as the memory impairments become a little bit more prominent in everyday life. And so this is happening when the risks of health and safety, like I was mentioning at the beginning of my talk, are more concerning, like the not leaving the stove on, leaving the water on, things like that. When you notice things like that are affecting the or impacting potentially the health and safety, we want to make sure that we're not leaving the person alone for too long, because wandering is very, very common with memory impairments.
And then the depth perception gets really impacted. And so that's where the falls also, like Dr. Wong had mentioned before. But if they're wandering and then they fall somewhere, say on the road, because we don't have we don't have sidewalks everywhere, that could really affect them. I mean, put their life in danger too.
Okay, so I'm mindful of time. We are almost there. So we just have a few more slides and then we can get more questions. But as a caregiver, it's really, really important to manage your stress. So just like how everything we talked about with managing your brain health, you want to apply that for yourself too, right? So you want to be making sure that you're exercising regularly, having an outlet like writing in a journal, trying relaxation techniques to manage your stress, and also finding ways that you can stay positive through everything you're going through. So just stress is just a natural part of life. And short-term stress can help focus our thoughts and motivate us to take action. Whereas over time, chronic stress can really change our brain. It can really affect our memory, and it can increase the risk of ourselves, again, developing memory difficulties. So just like that cycle we were talking about earlier, if we're not engaging in self-care, we're putting ourselves at increased risk for ourselves developing memory difficulties. So just like we were saying before, just find ways that you yourself can exercise regularly. Putting your thoughts or worries on paper can help with having an outlet for yourself to problem solve, to think of a new solution, also to process everything you're going through too. Okay, and so while you're busy caring for yourself and you're the person that you love and the person that you're caring for, again, don't forget to take time about your emotional health too, right? So caring for someone who's going through memory difficulties, it does take a lot of time and effort. Sometimes you might feel discouraged, sad, lonely, frustrated, confused, or angry, and these feelings are completely normal and what a lot of caregivers experience. And so these are just some coping statements that we've thought of that maybe you can tell yourself when you are feeling particularly stressed. You can tell yourself, I'm doing the best I can. What I'm doing would be hard for anyone. I'm not perfect, and that's okay. I can't control some things that happen. Sometimes I just need to do what works for now. Even when I do everything I can think of, the person with memory difficulties, dementia, or Alzheimer's will still have problem behaviors because of the illness, not because of what I do. I will enjoy the moments when we can be together in peace. And I will try to get help from a counselor if caregiving becomes too much for me. Yeah, so again, we want to prioritize you and what you're going through, and making sure that yourself as a caregiver, you feel supported and your emotional health is also taken care of. So just engaging in positive coping statements too, to help manage all of the stress that you're going through. And so here are just some local resources, a list of local resources that we've compiled. Thank you, Judy, so much for assisting with this. If you are, like after today's talk, are thinking about ways that you can reach out to your community, these are some agencies that might be a good stepping stone in making sure that you have access to resources in your community. So, sorry, I'm gonna drink some water. My throat is dry.
Been a marathon presentation.
Yeah, so the first organization is Judy's organization, so ASA-DSV. Helps connect victims of domestic and sexual violence to resources in American Samoa. So like we were mentioning, there's a really strong relationship between surviving abuse and trauma and our memory functioning. So if this is something that yourself are noticing as a caregiver, or might be something of concern for the person you're taking care of, please reach out to Judy's organization. The next agency is the Agency for Better Living Endeavors. And this is a community service organization trying to support caregivers and families with dementia and memory impairments. And then the next agency is TAOA, which is provide services for older adults. So the services are really across the spectrum. So they're really skills-based. They offer opportunities for activities. And they also, I believe, are starting a caregiver certification program.
They have already completed some their first cycle, I believe, and then they're also looking at, I think, employment for some of our elderly.
Then there's Hope House, which is a hospice facility. So if someone needs more care, they can't be taken care of at home, or they need care for comfort, Hope House is a resource you can reach out to. And then there's So'oula Asolele, which is a community resources for assisting the elderly population. They might have some opportunities for social gatherings for older adults.
Yes, you can create, they'll do different crafts and things like that together as well. So good stuff.
And then these are just more caregiving tips and resources if you want to just do your own reading on your own, education on your own time. A lot of the information that we talked about today was provided by the National Institutes of Aging. They have a lot of good resources if you are just wanting to learn more about what to expect, resources for caregiving. This is also a really good publication if you want to just learn other perspectives from other caregivers and what they've been through. And then the ADEAR Adir Center is they are really receptive if you have any questions about how to care for someone with Alzheimer's disease or dementia or any memory impairments. Please feel free to reach out to them too. But they also have a lot of educational material on their website as well. So I know that we went a little bit over time. I know we have a few more minutes, but thank you so much, everyone, for attending and for making time for our talk today. Really, really, really appreciated our time together today, and just, really appreciative of you all being so open to this talk and just for your engagement today.
Dr. Ita, did you have anything else you wanted to add on?
No, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be able to do this. And as Dr. Wong said, there's a lot of information here. So please take it back, read through it, continue to do some more research, and continue to get the support for yourselves as well. The idea is that the healthier that we are as individuals, the healthier we are as a community. So please let us know. I think we have a few minutes for questions as well, if there are any other questions that have come up.
Yes, if anyone has any questions.
Sherry had said, thank you so much for this virtual training. It really helped make sense of things I'm actually dealing with and experiencing with my mom. Thank you for being a part of this. I know that there's a lot of things happening, and again, this is just one resource of many that are out there. So we hope that you take this information and take what's important and apply it. Sherry had mentioned earlier, I do this with my mom, and Judy had mentioned it too. I think all of these things sometimes we're guilty of doing, but the important part is that we continue to engage, we continue to be there for our loved ones and for each other. So thank you so much. Thank you for facilitating, Judy.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wong, for facilitating this this very, very informative and very important webinar, as well as our very own Dr. Ita. We thank you so much for all the work that both of you do out there in your communities, and we hope that this webinar we hope that you will find this webinar very useful, and we hope that the information in this webinar is able to help you out in whatever situation you're having to deal with, especially with those with memory difficulties. So we thank you again for joining us. I'm Judy Matoti. Until next time, this is your American Samoa Alliance Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. Thank you. Soifua.